This podcast is brought to you by sarahraven.com, which is home to everything you need for a truly beautiful and productive garden. You'll also find great and essential gardening kit and stylish, lovely things to have in your house to bring the outside indoors, all inspired by the garden and the house being tied together. There's also plenty of garden inspiration, how-to videos and specialist growing guides. So head over to sarahraven.com today to discover even more. Welcome to Grow, Cook, Eat, Arrange, the podcast of me, Sarah Raven, and today I'm joined by Philippa Stewart from Justdahlias, who, like me and Josie and everyone at Perch Hill, is a massive dahlia enthusiast. And that's how I came across and met Philippa, because she loves dahlias as much as we do. I mean, that's hard to do, but I would say Philippa is definitely in the running. And I just thought it'd be really fun for her to talk about dahlias, and particularly her specialism, which is about drying them so that we can all, those of us who are growing fabulous dahlias, can then have them in our houses to look really fantastic when they are no longer in our gardens. So welcome, Philippa. It's lovely to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me.
Oh, no, it's really great. So tell us how you got into gardening, how you got into dahlias, and also where you are, where you live. So give us some background.
Okay, so I'm up in Cheshire in the northwest of England, and my soil is heavy clay. Always seems to be the most important thing when people are growing flowers. So we've lived in the house for a very long time, and we inherited in the garden just 2 pear trees in a leylandii hedge. Mm-hmm. So I don't claim to be any great gardener at all, but I had to start from scratch with the garden. And I think, like a lot of people, I started in the spring, and I found that I had filled my garden with spring and early summer flowering plants. And suddenly one year I got to July and realised I didn't have any flowers. In fact, the garden looked like it needed to be put to bed.
Yeah.
And there was no prospect of any flowers. So that's what first got me into dahlias. And I started with just a few, and they were the large decorative, or some people call them dinner plate varieties, because those are the ones that, well, I couldn't believe that I'd grown a flower that was 30 centimetres in diameter.
Yeah.
That was, that hooked me in immediately. And then not only that, but, I'm northern and I like value for money. And these plants were pumping out the blooms for months on end. So I was hooked immediately. And then when I started looking into it, I realized there were thousands of different types of dahlia. In fact, I'd even been growing a dahlia and didn't realize it. Somebody had given it to me and I'd just put it in a pot and it kept on flowering. I kept thinking, oh, this is really good. I don't know what it is, but it's really good. And then when I looked into dahlias, I thought, oh, that's a dahlia. That's why it keeps on flowering. And at the time, I was growing vegetables in my vegetable garden. And I thought one year, well, it'd be rather nice to have a glut of flowers instead of a glut of courgettes. So at the time, the National Dahlia Collection sold rooty cuttings, and they had thousands of varieties. So I spent lots of wonderful evenings in the winter going through their website, trying to reduce my shopping basket down to a realistic size.
I know that feeling.
Yes. And I ended up with ordering about 60 or 70 plants, and I probably planted them way too close, had no idea how big these plants were going to be. Anyway, that year, I was literally drowning in flowers. By the end of August, I couldn't believe I was giving flowers away to friends. I was boring all of my friends with, oh my God, you've got to come and look at these. These are incredible,
How long ago was that, Philippa?
I think that was about maybe 2015,
Yeah.
sort of that. So only 10 years ago. Gosh,
yeah.
It's not that long ago. And about the same time, because I was boring all my friends with posts on my Instagram feed of flowers, I thought, well, I'll start a public Instagram site. This was when Instagram was completely different from what it is today. And I'll see if there's anybody else out there who thinks that dahlias is good. And within a couple of weeks, I was talking to people all over the world, and that is the magic of social media as far as I'm concerned. I was talking to people in Germany, in America, and all swapping names of varieties. And that was really exciting. And about that time as well, I thought, well, again, because I'm northern and I hate waste, I thought, well, what am I going to do with all these flowers? So I did load up my car with some buckets and drove them around to the local florists. And one of the florists, when I opened the boot of the car, went, oh! And I thought, ooh, I think I'm onto something here.
Oh, brilliant.
And I've got no floristry background at all. But she explained to me that we know that dahlias don't like being out of water. And at the time, there were very few British growers. So she was ordering from the Dutch markets. And she said, by the time they arrive here, they're so badly bruised and bashed, I end up throwing them away.
Yeah.
But she was a wedding florist, so she needed those big blousy blooms.
For later in the year. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So suddenly I thought, oh, maybe I could sell a few. And if I can sell a few, then it can fund me having more dahlias. So that was the method in the madness. So that's how I started.
Fabulous. And you had a full range of colours, didn't you? What are your sort of favourite colours?
Oh, gosh. Well, I'm sure you found, like me, that your dahlia taste changes over the years. So I started out loving the bright colours, and I say the really big blooms. I had Florel, which was a white.
Yes. I know.
Oh, you know it, a white large decorative, which that's the one that was 30 centimetres in diameter. But then my taste has changed, and I've gone a couple of years ago. I was really into the mini pom-poms, just loved. I had one called Tam Tam, which is a small burgundy one with a lime green stem. Absolutely loved that one. And at the moment, I'm sort of going on to the singles, which is not such a good idea from the breeding point of view, because the single gene is a dominant gene.
Yes.
So I don't actually want to grow singles. I'm trying to work out in my head, if I cut them all before they set pollen, then hopefully they shouldn't affect my seed production. But I am really taken with them. When you see all the bees, I refer to it as like a nectar bar. You can see the bees just hopping from one flower to the next, to the next, to the next. So I do, I'm sort of moving on to the collarettes as well. I love those. But again, I'm not sure if that's a dominant gene. So the yellows and the singles are definitely dominant genes. So I know that I need to remove yellows and remove singles from my breeding patch. So I have two growing areas now. Once I realised that there was a market for the flowers, and as with most people now, we're surrounded by wedding venues. So I was within easy reach, because I'm collection only, but easy reach for customers to say, oh yes, well, I'm going to that venue, it's just down the road from you. And they'll stop off and pick up their flowers.
Fantastic.
So in the field next to our house, I've created 5 25-metre beds. So this was only ever meant to be something for me to do. So although the field is bigger than that, 5 25-metre beds is plenty. Massive, as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, absolutely.
And in fact, as I'm getting older now, I am getting increasing amounts of help. My knees and my back can't take it anymore.
Yeah, I bet.
But in those beds, when I was in full fresh selling, then I would have a white border, a yellows and orange and red border, a burgundy border, peachy colours, and anything that didn't fit those colours went in the final bed. So that's how I just realised that to suit all of the customers, I needed to have the full range of flowers, because I had some that really wanted the bubblegum pops of colour, and then others who wanted the much more subtly shaded ones. So personally, I love all those muted tones, like Jasudi Mercury for me. Oh, it's just such a muted, corally, lovely. And it goes with everything.
Such good shape as well. So, Philippa, explain to us then how the story evolved, and you then got into drying dahlias, and talk us through the technicalities of that.
Yes. So I'd started drying dahlias maybe a year or so before COVID, and just sort of trying with it. And actually, I was a bit embarrassed, because I can remember I had another flower farmer coming to my house, and I had some hanging up in the kitchen. And I thought, well, I'll take those down, because he'll think I'm absolutely bonkers. Obviously, dahlias don't dry. They'll just go to mush. Then as they did dry, I thought, oh, I'm getting some really interesting shapes and really interesting effects with them. And then, of course, COVID hit, and sod's law, that year was my best flowering season. I don't know if you remember, but the spring in COVID year was absolutely fantastic. So I had a field full of flowers, and at the time my children were living abroad, so they weren't able to come home. So I thought, right, well, I'm not going to put them on the compost heap. So I just dried absolutely everything I could. So as you can see, we have beams in our house. So nobody can tell if I've knocked some nails in. So I just knocked nails in the beams and put loads of chicken wire up, and they're quite low ceilings. So I make sure that we've got walking corridors. So this is a walking corridor behind me so that you can actually get around. And my husband doesn't seem to mind.
Flowers above and below.
Absolutely. And he did say rather famously once, as long as I can see the telly, I don't mind.
Oh.
So that is literally it. In the sitting room, I've got 6 rows of this. And we live in a well-ventilated, aka drafty house.
Yes.
So it just seems to be the perfect environment.
Yeah.
All I find is all I need to do is pick them and hang them upside down. They're out of direct sunlight, although sometimes I found when they've been closer to a window, I've got some lovely fading on them, which gives this sort of faded glory look. So yeah, there's no magic to it. It's dead easy. Just hang them upside down in a well-ventilated place. I would say you can't have a whiff of moisture.
Yeah.
So we have in my orchard, I have an agricultural shed which is open on one side. I thought, perfect. I put loads of wire up there. I'll be able to dry them all in here, but just not dry enough. They actually went mouldy in there.
Yes, it's really interesting that, isn't it? Because I dry lots of allium heads. And I found exactly that is if they're in a shed, they actually go black by October. Whereas if I have them in a more domestic setting, they dry brilliantly. So I think it is just the atmosphere is just too humid outside. I think it is that. But also the other thing that I know you've taught me is that you do need to hang them individually, not in bunches. That's right, isn't it? So each individual stem is separate.
Yes. Well, that's my method. I've never done it any other way. But I, in my head, they needed to have air circulating round them.
Yeah.
But in fact, when I am hanging them like this, and to do one of these runs here, that's 50 centimetres wide, one of those runs, it will take me all day to pick flowers for that.
Okay.
So there are hundreds and hundreds of flowers in there. And I do actually hang them close together because as soon as they start drying, they shrink.
Yes.
So they end up being
very
separate.
Gappy. Yes.
Yes, so they do, but I would never put an elastic band around and have a bunch together. I would always hang them individually.
Exactly, and that is something that I've done wrong in the past, and I think that is a really, really good tip, is that each flower has to have good air circulation rather than each bunch.
Also, I find that, so this is Caroline Wagaman's dried, and I find that when they're hanging up, initially, all the petals will droop down, but as they dry, they lift up again. So you do end up, if you can see that this is not a flat, cone-shaped flower. It has actually opened up. So it does need a little bit of space around it. Otherwise, those would flatten.
Yes, absolutely.
So yes, that's the method in my madness.
Yeah.
And all I do, as my husband says, that for the amount of time and effort that goes into these flowers, there should be £25 a stem.
Yeah.
But I just push a little piece of floristry stub wire through the end of the bloom, bend it over to make a hook, and then hook it onto the chicken wire.
Yeah, great. And in terms of colours, I mean, this is the other thing that when we were talking that I was surprised by. You say that really quite a lot of colours don't dry so well, that they get a bit sort of murky and they lose their intensity. And I remember you saying that mauve is actually a particularly good colour for drying.
Yes, the important thing to remember when they dry is that the colour intensifies. And I've also found that, at the beginning of the season, the dahlias are very rich in colour. And actually, sometimes my first wave of drying is not successful because they will dry to quite a dull colour. I haven't kept any here so that I could show you, but they will dry to a flat, dull colour. Whereas this is a Caroline Wagaman's from later on in the season, which will be a much lighter peach. And then the colour, as you know, the Caroline Wagaman's is very much a light peach, but this is obviously like a sort of rusty, pinky red colour.
Much more intense,
So, Yes, yeah. So I find, for instance, you'll be familiar with sweet Nathalie. And sweet Nathalie is such, well, I would call it blush. Although interpretations of the word blush that's a separate debate.
Yes, colour descriptions.
But as you know, there's a very slight pinky tinge to sweet Nathalie.
Yeah.
And that has come out in the drying process as well.
Yes, look at that.
Here. So the ones that I find are the least successful are the purple, the sort of mid-purple flowers. So for instance, if
like Ambition or something like that, the spiky cactus one.
Yeah, it would dry to a very flat and, in my humble opinion, boring purple. But I would also say to people to try different locations, because I get different results in different locations. And also somebody said to me, I was doing a flower farming course, and the lady there said, oh yes, I dry dahlias, but the whites don't work. Well, I have huge success with white. So I would say try a different location. It may be that particular grower didn't have enough of a moisture-free atmosphere.
Yes.
So the whites I find dry perfectly.
Gosh, and is flower form, so, you know, whether it's cactus or water lily or single or decorative, or does that affect how successful they are?
Yes. Well, it affects the shape that finally comes out. So this would have been a sort of semi-cactus one.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to see if I've got a Jasudi Mercury, but I haven't got one here.
Yeah.
And again, with selling to florists, what I need is a range of colours and a range of shapes. Yeah. So it's brilliant that they all dry differently, because the mini pom-poms will stay really small and mini pom-poms, perfect for buttonholes or for that little pop of colour in arrangements. The cactus will give me much more spiky shapes, which some customers love, some don't. Yeah. And then the water lilies give me, you know, different shape again. Yeah. So again, it's making sure I've got the full range. Yeah. And that's the bit of doing an order that I absolutely love, because customers will say, well, I'm trying to do this, that and the other. And then I'll be running around the house going, oh, well, I've got these. What do you think about these? And I've got this one. What do you think about that? And trying to fit their brief is a joyful part. Yes.
Yes. So when you're sending out the dried, I mean, I imagine you're much more busy in the winter, but is there any tip that you need to give your florists or to any of us to make them sort of stay dried and not then get too humid and then start to decompose? Or once they're dry, are they dry?
Oh, absolutely there is a tip, because I found, to my huge disappointment last year when I was doing RHS Wisley, I was invited to take part in the Dahlia marquee there with about 20 other growers, and obviously they wanted me to bring the dried. So we set up on the Thursday night. I don't even remember, but last September was particularly wet. And when I came back in the morning, the condensation in the marquee, all the dried flowers had absorbed that condensation and were looking very, very sad. So yes, once they're dry, these flowers, I mean, I've got a wreath above my fireplace that's been there for 2 years. So once they're dry, yes, they will stay dry. I'm just holding a cafe au lait here, because there was something I wanted to say about that. But you need to make sure that so for instance, I'm afraid they're not good for outdoor wreath arrangements on your door. Again, they will just absorb the moisture and they will either droop, or they'll flatten, or they will go mouldy. So they do need to stay in a drier environment. So ones that I'm storing for stock, I keep in dry buckets in my workroom, but that is a completely dry environment. So yes, do watch out for any moisture.
Great. And yeah, you were going to tell us something about cafe au lait.
Yes, I was going to say that, you know, people always think that the dry flowers are very fragile, and they're really not at all. This is a cafe au lait dahlia, which, you know, in fact, all of them I would say are very robust. But that's not the case for all the large decoratives. So if you are going to be drying a large decorative variety, then sometimes I wire them before they go up to be dried, and it just keeps the weak part is the connection between the head and the stem. Weirdly, with cafe au lait, for some reason it just doesn't seem to have that weak connection. But other varieties I've found I need to wire them beforehand. Oh yes, and you were asking me earlier about varieties that I don't like in the fresh. So I'm trying to breed my own varieties at the moment. So And of course, it's not only whether I like them fresh, it's whether I like them dry as well. So this is one of my boards that I keep for all the varieties. These are all the Caroline Wagaman varieties that I grew last year from seed.
Fantastic.
And I dry them and label them so that I know when I'm digging the tubers up that, well, actually, maybe I didn't like it in the fresh, but some of the yellows, like for instance, this one has dried to the most gorgeous goldy colour.
Yeah.
It's just magnificent. But as a yellow, it was probably quite boring, but I'll be definitely keeping that one. So that's how I keep tabs on it. And I had another one called Peppermint Splash. I'm afraid I don't like the ones that look like they've been splattered with paint.
Yes.
And Peppermint Splash is one of those. It looks like it's been splattered with pink paint, but when it dries, oh my goodness, it's absolutely stunning.
Gosh.
And it's actually one of my best sellers. And I haven't got one because I sold out of those almost immediately.
Isn't that interesting?
It has this sort of vintage look. So I would say that's the joy of dahlias. There's so much. They're like the gift that keeps giving.
Yes.
You think you're getting all these fresh flowers, and then you've got tubers you can share with your friends, and then you can dry them, and then you can keep the dried, and and then there's growing from seed. So it's just, there's a lot to learn from them.
Fabulous. Well, it's so lovely to talk to you. And I just want to reassure everyone that we've videoed this chat. So when Philippa's showing us things, you will be able to see that if you want to on screen. And that's just, there's so many good tips there. Hanging them individually upside down, good arid situation with good air circulation, and experiment with your site throughout your house and throughout your own situation. Maybe wire the stems to hang them more easily, and with some you might need to wire the head onto the stem. And then continue to keep them arid, so not outside, and experiment. I mean, those are the sort of take-homes that I've got, really. But Philippa, it's so nice to chat. And why don't you give us your website and your Instagram feed so people can follow you and learn more from you?
That's brilliant. So my Instagram feed is Justdahlias, and that's all one word, no spaces. And my website is www.justdahlias.co.uk. And I've got a flowering now section in there, which shows, actually it's quite a good record book for me. So it shows historically as well as what I'm growing this year. And then there's the just dried section, which shows you the dried that's available this year and in subsequent years as well.
Fabulous. Well, that's so great. And let's chat again in a few months' time when, did you tell me you were thinking of working on a book?
I would like to ultimately, just at the moment, I'm obsessed with the breeding side, and these seedlings are taking over my life. And it's something I'm trying to encourage other people to do, because I just think how amazing to have a plant that exists nowhere else in the world.
Isn't it?
And have your own unique dahlias. So I'm absolutely loving that side. So yes, if I feel, because really the drying, that there is nothing to it. All you do is hang them upside down. So I can't write a book on that, although I could fill it with pretty pictures of dried flowers. But on the seeding side as well, then yes, that would be my ultimate, when my knees give up.
Yeah, very good. Well, lovely to chat, and thanks so much for telling us so much about drying dahlias.
That's a pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
Thanks so much for listening to Grow Cook Eat Arrange with me, Sarah Raven, and Philippa Stewart on drying dahlias and breeding dahlias a little bit. But perhaps we'll get Philippa back soon to talk more about her breeding dahlia programme. Next week, I'm back on my own, and I want to do an allium recap. I've really tried to sort of focus on having a succession of alliums that will give you something beautiful to follow on from the tulips in May, right the way through until August, when the dahlias can really pick up the colour pattern. So alliums, May to August. See you then.
You can find more information, photos and advice sheets on all the plants and recipes we talk about on this podcast by heading to the show notes or at sarahraven.com/podcast.